Your wife has stopped looking you in the eyes. Have you noticed that? That sparkle that was there when you saw each other at the end of the day has simply disappeared. She replies to your messages with monosyllables, turns to the opposite side in bed, and when you try to hug her, her body tenses as if being forced into something uncomfortable. You did everything right. You helped with house chores, listened to her vent, canceled commitments to be present, showed love in every way you knew. And yet, inexplicably, the woman who promised to love you forever acts as if you are invisible. This is the point where most men fall into despair. They start doing even more, believing the problem is a lack of effort. They buy gifts, plan romantic dinners, send affectionate messages every hour. They become even more available, attentive, present. And the more they do this, the worse it gets. The distance grows. The disdain increases. Until one day you wake up and realize you've become a stranger in your own home. There is a brutal truth about relationships that no one told you when you were in love, exchanging rings, and making eternal promises. Attraction is not permanent just because love exists. In fact, many times love continues to exist while attraction slowly dies, suffocated by behaviors you thought were expressions of affection. Every time you put your own plans aside to please her, every time you agreed when you wanted to disagree, every time you swallowed your opinion to avoid conflict, you were killing something essential. Strategic distancing seems cruel at first glance. It seems like psychological games, emotional manipulation, even disguised revenge. But it is none of that. It is simply the act of reclaiming what you lost while trying to be the perfect husband, your own life. When a man starts to distance himself, he is not punishing his wife for her disinterest. He is returning to himself, reclaiming the identity that was diluted in the process of trying to be everything for someone who, ironically, lost interest precisely because he became too predictable. The scientific truth behind this bothers many people, but it needs to be said. There is a biological component in female attraction that responds to challenge, unpredictability, the sense that a man has value beyond the relationship. When you are always available, always predictable, always bending your will to fit her desires, you completely remove this element. You become too safe, too familiar. And excessive safety, as contradictory as it may seem, kills passion. Observe couples around you. Those where the man lives for his wife, where every decision passes through her judgment, where he asks permission to go out with friends or seeks her approval for every little choice. In these relationships, you will notice a pattern. The woman may like comfort and predictability, but rarely shows genuine desire. She may love her husband as one loves a brother or close friend, but that spark that existed at the beginning is dead. Now think of those couples where the man maintains his own life. Has his projects, his goals, his independent routine. He is not always available, does not cancel everything for her, does not live chasing validation. In these relationships, even after years, there is still sexual tension. There is still mutual interest. The woman continues to look at you as she did in the beginning because you did not become predictable. You maintained the mystery, the autonomy, the sense of purpose. Distancing is not about ignoring your wife or treating her badly. It is about stopping putting her at the absolute center of your existence. It is about going back to having hobbies, goals, and a life that does not revolve around pleasing someone else. It is about reclaiming the man she met and fell in love with, before you became someone who exists only as her extension. If you are living this situation right now, if you recognized your reality in the words above, then you need to understand what really happens when a man decides to strategically distance himself. The reactions are predictable, the phases are identifiable, and the final outcome depends on something you do not yet know. If this content is making sense to you, subscribe to the channel to follow the rest of this explanation. Her first reaction will take you by surprise. You expected her to be sad, perhaps even regretful when she noticed your absence. But that's not what happens. She gets angry. An intense, disproportionate anger, as if you had committed some horrible crime just for starting to live your own life. This initial phase is brutal because it completely challenges your expectations about how things should work. When you stop sending those constant messages throughout the day, when you stop asking what she wants for dinner, when you schedule that commitment with friends without checking her calendar first, something changes in the air. She starts testing you. Makes sharp comments about your new routine. Questions where you were, who you were with, why it took so long to respond. Every small change in your behavior is dissected, analyzed, turned into a reason for heated argument. This anger is not random. It is an instinctive response to a loss of control. All the time you were the always available, always predictable husband, she had a sense of absolute security. She knew exactly where you were, what you were doing, how you would react in every situation. Your life revolved around her, and that created an invisible comfort zone. Now that you've left this orbit, the discomfort is immense. And discomfort manifests as anger before transforming into anything else. Here is the critical moment that defines everything: how you respond to this initial anger. Most men immediately retreat. They feel guilty, think they are being selfish, run back to the previous pattern of behavior. And when they do, they forever lose the chance to change the dynamics of the relationship. Because she learns, even unconsciously, that she just needs to get angry for you to return to your usual place. The test was applied, and you failed. But if you hold your position, something interesting starts to happen. Her anger doesn't disappear immediately, but it begins to mix with something different: confusion. She cannot understand why her usual tactics aren't working. Why you're not begging for attention like you always did. Why you seem genuinely fine, perhaps even better than before, even without her constant validation. This confusion pulls her out of emotional autopilot and forces her to actually think about the relationship. During this transition phase, you will notice small changes in her behavior. She starts observing you more closely. Notices when you leave, when you return, how you are dressed, whether you are smiling more or less. There is a new vigilance, different from the indifference that existed before. Because now you have become unpredictable again. You have become interesting again. And this awakens something primitive that had been dormant for a long time. The mistake many make at this point is thinking the goal is to make her suffer or feel jealous. It isn't. The real goal is for you to genuinely reconnect with who you were before you lost your identity in the marriage. This means investing time in hobbies that were abandoned. It means pursuing professional goals that were put on hold. It means having interesting conversations with others, expanding your social circle, becoming someone with stories of their own to tell at the end of the day. The difference between manipulation and genuine self-development lies in intention. If you are doing all this just to provoke a reaction in her, eventually your facade will fall and she will see the game. But if you are doing this because you finally understood that you lost important parts of yourself, the change is authentic. And authentic changes are impossible to fake in the long term. They shine through in every action, every word, every decision you make. There is a specific moment in this process where everything can collapse or solidify. It is when she attempts reconciliation for the first time. It can be subtle, a touch on your arm that hadn't happened in months, a genuine question about your day, a smile that seems real for the first time in a long time. This moment is a trap for the desperate man who was waiting for any sign of affection. He throws himself headlong, returns to old behavior, and destroys all progress in seconds. The secret is to receive these signals naturally, without anxiety, without exaggerated celebration. You respond, but you don't change your trajectory because of it. You continue living your life, continue focusing on your goals, continue being that man she is starting to rediscover. Because the inconvenient truth is this: she will only genuinely value what she cannot completely control. Now we reach the point where everything intensifies in ways you never imagined. She starts to provoke you. Not in a childish or obvious way, but through sophisticated psychological tests that most men don't even realize they are facing. She casually mentions a co-worker who invited her to lunch. Comments on how neglected she feels. Makes subtle comparisons between you now and how you used to be. Every sentence is a lure cast into the water, waiting to see if you will bite. These tests are not conscious most of the time. She is not coldly planning every move as if it were a chess game. It is something deeper, more instinctive. The female brain is trying to figure out if this change in you is real or just temporary. If you really became that man of self-worth, or if it's just a phase that will pass when she presses the right buttons. And believe me, she knows all your buttons because she spent years installing them. The most dangerous provocation comes disguised as vulnerability. She cries. Says she feels you are drifting apart. Questions if you still love her. Asks to talk about the relationship, to reconnect, to go back to how things were before. And here lies the ultimate danger, because it seems genuine. It might even be genuine on some level. But if you give in completely, abandoning your new path to return to the old pattern, you'll be confirming that nothing really changed. That all it took was for her to show weakness for you to rush back. The man who understands this process responds with compassion, but not with submission. He listens, validates her feelings, but does not sacrifice his personal trajectory on the altar of her momentary insecurity. He says he also values the relationship, but makes it clear that his life can no longer revolve exclusively around it. That he needs to be a complete man in order to offer something real, not just an emotional puppet dancing to the tune she plays. Here something happens that separates two completely different types of women. Some will understand this stance and, even if initially frightened, will start to respect and value the man who maintains his boundaries even more. Others will interpret it as definitive rejection and begin seeking validation elsewhere. And this is the most painful part of the whole process. You may be doing everything right and still lose the relationship. Because not all marriages can be saved, and not all women are seeking the same type of relationship. The woman who values stability and genuine commitment will begin to show a different form of affection. Not that dependent need that existed before, but something more mature. She stops constantly testing and starts investing back. Plans things for both of you. Shows genuine interest in your personal projects. Sex regains the quality of those first years because there is now real tension again. There is true desire, not just marital obligation performed mechanically. But the woman who primarily seeks external validation and constant novelty will react in the opposite way. The more you distance yourself emotionally, the more she distances herself physically. She may start openly flirting with other men. May suggest divorce or separation. May create increasingly intense dramas to try to force a strong emotional reaction from you. And here is the brutal truth. If she reacts this way, your marriage had been dead for a long time. You just stopped performing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on a corpse. This is the moment of greatest emotional pain in the entire process. Because regardless of the outcome, you are forced to face the reality of your relationship without the filters you used before. If she returns and invests genuinely, you discover that the marriage could be saved and just needed a reality check. If she drifts even further away, you discover that you had been living an illusion for years, loving someone who hadn't felt the same for you in a long time. The temptation to give up at this point is overwhelming. Returning to old patterns seems easier than continuing to face this daily uncertainty. But this is exactly where you cannot falter. Because regardless of what happens with the marriage, you need to complete this process for yourself. You need to become that man of self-worth not to save a relationship, but to be able to look in the mirror and respect the person you see. After going through all the phases, through all the anger, confusion, tests, and provocations, you finally reach the point where the truth reveals itself in crystal clarity. Strategic distancing was never really about your wife. It was always about you. About reclaiming that man who got lost in the process of trying to be the perfect husband. About understanding that you cannot build a healthy relationship when your own identity is diluted in someone else's. If your wife is one who values genuine commitment and emotional stability, she now looks at you differently. There is a new respect in her eyes. She stops taking your presence for granted because she understands that you have your own life, your own goals, a world that exists beyond her. And paradoxically, this makes her want to be a part of that world. She invests time in you, shows real interest, actively participates in building something better between the two of you. The relationship that emerges from this process does not look like what you had before. It is more balanced, more honest, more mature. The dynamic of pursuer and pursued, of someone loving desperately while the other passively accepts that love no longer exists. There is real reciprocity. She desires you not because you are always available, but precisely because you are not. Because you have become an interesting challenge again, a man with his own purpose who chooses to be with her instead of needing to be with her. But if your wife is one who primarily seeks external validation and constant novelty, the outcome will be different. She may have distanced herself definitively during the process. She may have sought attention elsewhere. She may have decided that she prefers the excitement of something new over the work of rebuilding something old. And as painful as it is to admit, this too is a form of response. A response that frees you from years of effort directed at the wrong person. Many men waste decades trying to make a relationship work with someone who fundamentally wants different things. They contort themselves, adapt, sacrifice, thinking that eventually love and dedication will be enough. But love without basic compatibility is just beautiful suffering. It is tragic poetry that consumes you inside while you smile on the outside. Distancing reveals this incompatibility in a brutal but necessary way, before you spend more precious years of your life in a battle you cannot win. The deepest lesson of this entire process has nothing to do with techniques or psychological strategies. It has to do with self-worth. With understanding that you cannot genuinely love another person if you do not first love and respect yourself. That healthy relationships are not built on emotional dependence, but on two complete individuals choosing to share their lives. That true attraction comes from mutual admiration, not desperate need. When you look back at the man who was so lost trying to please a woman who barely noticed him, you feel something strange. It is not anger or resentment. It is compassion. Compassion for someone who didn't understand that he was drowning while trying to save someone else who wasn't even asking to be saved. Who confused sacrifice with love, constant availability with commitment, and passive acceptance with marital happiness. The true power of distancing lies in forcing you to confront inconvenient truths about yourself and your relationship. It removes the comfortable illusions you built to make an unsustainable situation bearable. It forces you to choose between continuing to live a comforting lie or facing an uncomfortable reality that can lead you to something genuinely better. In the end, you discover that the ideal relationship is not one where you need to erase yourself to be loved. It is one where you can be fully yourself and still be chosen. Where your presence is valued because you have something real to offer, not because you are always available. Where there is space for individual growth within the shared commitment. And if your marriage cannot become that, then perhaps it should never have been. If you have made it this far, subscribe to the channel. This knowledge can completely change the way you view relationships and your own life.